All right. Welcome back to another episode of In Bed with Books. Today I'm speaking with the author of Sanctuary of the Shadow, Aurora Ascher. Thank you for joining me
Hi.
today.
Thanks
Hi.
for having me.
Yeah, I was really excited when I caught this email. So thank you, Caitlin, for connecting us. Um,
Yeah, so
so I guess just start out, do you want to tell me a little bit about your book?
sure. It's a fantasy romance. Where do I start? The elevator pitch. This one always gets me. You're like, oh, it took me. I don't know. So yeah, it's in a fantasy world. We have elemental magic. So the five elements, and there's like different magical um species sort of that go with each element, and they have different like abilities and appearances. And it's our main character Harrow lives in a traveling circus, and yeah, kind of starts off there and goes places.
Yeah. First of all, I love Harrow. I love the last spoiler, I guess, but like the last seer, the last something, anything. It's really there's like the trope itself really sets up a dynamic that I'm always very excited for. So once that became clear, I was like, yes, in
Oh,
the story.
cool.
Yeah. But I want to ask you a little bit about your reading habits, which as writers informs, what we write. So I want to know the first book that got you really into reading. And if it was fantasy romance, I'd also like to know that, but just generally.
So this kind of a two-part question for me, because when I was a kid, I was like an obsessed, voracious reader. And then when I got a bit older, like teenager years, I stopped reading. I don't think I read a book, like voluntarily chose to read a book for like 10 years or so. And then I was working this really boring job, and I had time. This is when I first moved to Montreal, and I was just like had time to kill. And I ended up, I don't even know how I stumbled upon, because I never read a romance book in my life. And I stumbled upon J.R. Ward's Black Dagger Brotherhood series. I don't know if you know those, but I was like
I'm familiar
shocked.
with
Like
the
I was
author,
like,
yes.
yeah, I was like, oh my God, I didn't know that like books were like such it's like, like I thought books were like
Mm-hmm.
boring and like educational. I didn't know we could have like this kind of shit books. So I was really fired up. And that definitely kicked off everything that's happening now. The beginning of
Nice. So when was this? Just about?
it was almost 10 years ago now, maybe like 8 or 9 years. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So
It,
okay. So then I guess this is kind of pulling. This is straying from the list already, but
go
um
for it.
at what point in that then did you start writing?
Yeah. So that was after another few years of like, once I discovered romance books were a thing, I was like, well, I need to read everything. And like, I was really obsessed with paranormal romance. That's always been my like first kind of love. And I guess it was like 3 or 4 years, 3 years probably, of like really obsessive reading. Like it would be like my husband like couldn't take me anywhere without me like with my Kindle like in my back pocket. We sit for like 5 minutes. I was like, he was like, "Are you kidding me? Like I'm still done with it." But then yeah, and then I started getting all these like weird ideas of things that I wanted to see in books, or like ideas or like whatever, and I would always like be like ranting at my husband again, poor guy. And he was eventually like, just write your own book. And I was like, oh my
Just stop
God.
put it on pages. Stop telling me. Like
Yeah. So then that was the beginning of what I'm doing now.
nice. That's like a crazy transition there. I think I forget because I mean I've talked about it on the podcast before, but like I've been reading pretty much nonstop since I could read. And so I mean I've dabbled in writing, but just like jumping the gun there, like in a good way, an absolutely like phenomenal way because this book is so good and just like the artistry behind it. I'm so like amazed. So,
Thank you. I think
um
I've always had like a really overactive imagination. And I think what it took to like make that jump was to have an idea that like I just kind of like formulated ideas. And then at a certain point it was like, well, I'm not reading this idea. So I want to write it.
Nice. Nice. I love that. All right. So I guess this is I am curious to hear this now, but how do you choose what books to read?
I'm like 100% a mood reader. So there's no such thing as a TBR for me. I don't like plan books. If I want to read a book, I just read it. So it really depends on like where I'm at actually like emotionally because
Yes.
I use reading as like an outlet kind of, especially now that I'm primarily a writer. So I tend to not read things that are similar to what I'm writing because I find it just like gets muddled. Not like memory, but more like I start questioning what I'm doing when I'm reading something that's comparable. So like while I've been writing this last year, I got really randomly into like rom-coms. So like that's my current like phase right now. It's just like the cutest, fluffiest, but still spicy rom-coms.
Nice. Yes. I love that. What
Yeah.
was your favorite one from last year then? Because there was, I mean, I'm partial to like the trashy, like sea level. Like I'm talking, I watch Hallmark with my mom on the regulars.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually can't remember. I wish that I had prepared for the rom-com question because I can't actually remember what my favorite one that I read was. I wish I had a rec to give you. I read a lot. I think I read like
That's
120
fair.
books last year.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yes, it's a lot.
Nice.
I'm a
Nice. That
big fan of
respect.
single me. Yeah.
Well then if you do think of one, tell me later and then I'll make sure to add
Okay,
it to the description.
I will.
Um, okay, but then the next question is what is your go-to recommendation for anybody to read?
I always say like because paranormal romance was my first kind of love. Like I'm always like at my heart, I just always go back to those books. And I have like two series that I love, and will reread like every couple years just because they're, it's like comfort food or something at this point. But it's Cressley Cole's Immortals After Dark series and also Larissa Ione or Eon, I'm not sure how to say her last name, the Demonica series by her. Both of those series are just like they're so good. They're
Okay.
so fun and bingeable and like exciting. I love it.
I will definitely add those to my list because I'm looking for more bingeable things. I tell myself that every year when I'm setting like reading goals, and then I end up with like 500-page books, like 4 or 500-page books in a row, and I'm like, how?
Oh my
Why
gosh.
did I do this to myself?
Yeah, like
Um,
they're both those series are the books aren't short, but they're not like they're like like you just flip through them and they're like
mhm.
just so exciting and yeah, and they're all like sorry to do this to you, but they're both like 10 plus books long. So
uh,
like,
oh
you'll be
darn.
stuck. You'll be stuck for a while.
I actually don't mind that. One of my favorite series is The Hollows, which is a paranormal urban romance, and she's already on like book I think 18 is coming out this summer,
Oh,
and I'm
wow.
like, all
Are
right,
they
give them to me.
standalones? Are they
No,
like
so
standalones of the same characters every book?
yes, kind of.
Okay.
So they're like each book is structured around because it's like essentially a detective novel, but set in a paranormal urban like setting.
That's so
Um,
cool.
yeah, and there's a lot of hot fantasy sex as well.
Perfect.
Um, and yeah, so each book is a different case, but also they are all like the main character is the same throughout, and so it kind of builds for her. But I'm like, just keep I don't even care, just keep feeding it straight into my veins at this point. So
Yeah,
10 books is
honestly.
okay. I'll
Yeah.
tolerate. Um, but yeah, okay, I like that little foundation then of who you are as a reader. And I love the romance reader to writer pipeline because it's such like a if I can't find what's gonna actually make me come, I will write what makes me come. And I respect that.
Yeah. Or like just like this is my vibe and like rather than seeking out books forever with this vibe, I'm just gonna write all the
Yes.
things with this vibe. Yeah.
Yes. I okay, so I wanna jump ahead a little bit in the writing publishing questions, just kind of based on what we're talking about here, because you also do some other, like, art mediums. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, well, I guess one of the reasons I didn't get into writing and reading as much until later is because I was always a musician first. So that was like my passion as a kid growing up was like I was a piano player. I did classical music pretty seriously until I was about like 13 years old. And then kind of had like a anyone who's done classical music seriously will understand when I say that I had like a falling out and was like, I can't do this anymore. I quit everything. I didn't touch an instrument for 5+ years. But now that I'm older, I play music like with my husband and like just more in a much more fun, free setting. And yeah, and like I was also really into art as a kid and like it's something that I just kind of carried over. Art and painting and stuff was always like more of a casual like pastime. But yeah, it was pretty weird like to find myself where I am now, like saying, oh, I'm definitely like an author, like this is what I'm doing. This is
Mhm.
my career because like when I was one of those kids that you'd be like, "Oh, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And I'd be like, "A concert pianist." Like I was like so determined. So
And now you write smut, and that's okay.
yeah, like what
Yeah.
who knew?
So then in that respect, because kind of the way you're talking, like, with the if you can't find the right vibe, write it. Um, it feels very much reminiscent of, like, I will like this one song, I'm gonna play it over and over again, or I'm gonna search through all of the songs that I own or that I have access to, and hopefully find a different song with the same exact vibe, but that is not the same song. And that's just,
Yeah.
like, such a it's such, like, a God, I can't even pinpoint the word, but very specific to, like, creativity, where, like,
Hmm.
you need
Yeah.
that feeling to persist.
I think it too, it like doing other creative pursuits gives you a certain confidence in the like understanding that you're like, I want this thing. And you're so right that it like you totally like narrow down your tastes in these really specific ways. And then like because of my other experiences, when I was like, I want this specific thing, I wasn't ever like I couldn't be a writer. What is that? Like I was like, well, I can learn an instrument, I can paint, I can do it. So like why not write? Like it's kind of like it just kind of lends itself. So in that way, I'm really glad that I did, yeah, start out with other creative pursuits because I think they all kind of connect in a way.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I dabble in writing, but, like, I was in theater in high school, I played instruments as a kid, and, like, I think the muscles are similar, even if it's, like, a different part of your brain,
Mhm.
and, I mean, there's how many studies are there into, like, kids who are taught an instrument when they're younger, flex their brain in different ways, and, like, it benefits them in the long run. So, yeah, I can see how that was it a scary leap when you decided to, like, try out this new medium? Or when you first started trying out, was there the intent to publish as well, or how did that
Not at all. Yeah. Like I'm a super private, secretive person. So when I started writing, it was like with this condition to myself that like no one would ever see this would never see the light of day unless, well, that was at the time, that was all I want. I was like, this is for me. I didn't even want to tell people that I was writing because I knew that if I mentioned it, like my husband's always so supportive of like my different weird creative ventures. So I knew that if I even like told him, he would be like, I want to read it. And I was like, no, like, so like, yeah, and I think too, as I had a lot of unpacking to do, like from a feminist standpoint, like I was really embarrassed at first to be loving like romance novels that are like focused on like pleasure and like sensuality. Like I was really like, no one can know what I'm reading. Like people would be like, what are you reading? I'd be like, that's like, how dare you ask me that? Like, so I had this, it was like, it's kind of a healing process for me, like going through from, cause now I'm like, oh yeah, I write, slutty romance books. Like, don't read that if you don't want sex. Like, I'm totally like over it. But it was like this process of kind of healing in a way because by the time like I wrote my first book and then like I was finally like first I went through like where I admitted I was writing a book and that was like a big And everyone's like, wow. And I was like, don't ask me about it, So it's like, and that like to reach this point, it's been such a process for me. But it's really like I said, it's really like a healing thing, like because it's like to have like no shame and like, it's just like, yeah, take it or leave it. I don't care.
Nice. Nice. I love that. I love like getting rid of shame and cringe. It's like the freeing part. I know there's a lot of um like critique over how much romance novels are taking over like the publishing industry and everything. And from like a diversity standpoint, I can kind of understand that, but also like it's not like there's a self-help. It's if it was self-help books, I think it'd be like a very different narrative. Or if it was like,
Yeah.
like war documentary, like docu-series books kind of thing, like very different narrative. But because it's a series or like a genre where women are allowed to just enjoy themselves, yeah,
People are angry. Yeah.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
and
like literally every other media is all male gaze centered, like movies, TV, like it's like impossible, nearly impossible to find women centered media outside of books. So it's like, of course, we're dominating the publishing world because that's where like all women are going to find our content because it's not being made anywhere else. Like, sorry,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
it's like
exactly.
we're 50+% of the population and we like
Mhm.
consuming content just as much as the other 50%. So we're not gonna just lay down and like, it's like, sorry.
Yeah. Well, and at the time of filming this is shortly after the Oscar nominations have been announced. And
Yeah.
I like the whole Margot Robbie and Greta Gerwig thing where it's like they produced and directed and created this entire film that talks about how women have to try twice as hard to get half as far as men. And then that's exactly what happened when it came time for
And then
award season.
they give the award, like the irony of giving the award to the I'm Just Ken song. I was like,
Yes.
yeah, it was like, I was like, this is like the grandest irony of all time. Like it's just so, yeah, it was
And
crazy.
he realizes it. I like the statement that he released about it, but I'm like, I guarantee you the people who voted for this don't see the irony in this at
Yeah,
all.
no, for sure. Yeah,
It's just that's just the
I was
thought.
like a real Ryan Gosling fan after watching that clip where they're like, I'm just Ken. And it cuts to his face and he's like he's so shocked.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, I love this guy. He's
Same,
one of
same.
us.
Mhm.
And
He
that
is for the
speaking
girls.
yeah, exactly. Speaking of that, like that movie made so much money, the Barbie
Yes.
movie. And it's like because women love content for women, like we're all there, we're all showing up, we have money to spend. And it's actually hilarious to me when these major corporations, because that's what's, behind all media's huge corporations, they're like rejecting this content that can make them billions of dollars
Yeah.
and it's like you're literally shooting yourself in the foot because of your like misogyny, basically,
Yeah.
So it's like that's
Yes.
why publishing companies like Red Tower, like who publish Sanctuary, like they are run by women and like they understand the market and they're not like out to be like, pandering to these kinds of like judgmental people. They're like, here's what people want, let's give it to them. And I
Mhm.
respect that a lot.
Supply and demand. We're
Yeah.
demanding it.
Demanding it.
Yeah. I think the assumption with the Barbie movie, total derailment, but I just can't not
Oh
talk
yeah.
about it if this is what we're talking about. Is that like at face value, especially in the trailers and everything, but at face value, it was this very kind of traditional, like girly. It was covered in pink and they're all like girly girls. And speaking as somebody else who also, had to get over that kind of like letting myself be feminine thing when I was younger. Um, but the movie also balances like those really heartfelt moments between her and the human world and her creator and all of this stuff. And it's like this range of female experience that I wouldn't be surprised if a number of those voters just didn't even see because at face value it looked like a doll pink movie.
Okay. Yeah, totally. I definitely went into watching the movie like not sure because like I've never been like not like not that I don't do like beauty stuff, but I've never liked pink. And like, I never played with Barbies growing up. Like, I was kind of a weird, quiet, like awkward child. So I was like, I don't really have that like childhood, like kind of attachment to the idea of like Barbies, play with Barbies, whatever. So I was kind of like, I was almost worried that they were going to be like trying to narrow down womanhood into like, fake nails and wearing pink and, high heels. But then what I loved about it so much was that it actually turned out to be the exact opposite of that. And that's the whole point that they're trying to make in the movie. And I was like, oh my God, it's really, I loved it.
Yeah. And then, you leave the theater sobbing like everybody and all of their like viral reels. And I'm like, I get it now.
Yeah. No, and I was like, I would have worn pink too. Like, I'm so ready.
Yeah. Okay. So back to your writing. Um, Tell me a little bit about your process creating this world.
Yeah, so like I mentioned that my first love was paranormal romance. And like the first series I ever wrote, I was paranormal. I haven't published it. It's exists on a hard drive. It's one day I'll do something with it, but it was my like, I needed to have that secrecy when I wrote that. But when I finished that series, I was really drawn to the idea of writing something that like where I could just make up all the rules because like generally paranormal and urban, it's set on planet Earth in like real existing cities. So you've got to kind of follow the rules of Earth, like people communicate via text messages or whatever. So I was like, I want to just make up things. I want to make up a magic system and I want to like envision like a weird city, magical cities and like all these things. So that was kind of the original like motivation that set me down that path of doing fantasy. But I hadn't actually read a lot of fantasy
Nice.
romance like before that point. So it was kind of just for
Okay.
my own curiosity that I did it.
Nice, nice. And it's like a fully fleshed out whole world. That's a big step for if you haven't read a lot of fantasy. So, if you had to narrow down then I guess influences for not necessarily just the world building, but also kind of like I don't know, any TV you were watching at the time, any other books you were reading, and you like kind of found that they were finding their way into the writing?
Yeah. So there were, um, yeah, I think the main influence for the main inspiration for the setup of how Harrow and Rafe meet, which is like he's in a cage and she decides to like rescue him, actually came after watching that movie, The Shape of Water. I freaking love that movie. It's so good. I've always
Yes.
been obsessed with it. And I just love the whole dynamic of like he's this weird, kind of creepy, but like very like beautifully majestic
Mhm.
creature and he can't really communicate. And like she's also kind of misunderstood by the world. And they have this bond that forms like immediately because they're both, these misunderstood beings. And so like that kind of like obviously the dynamic is super different in my book. I'm not writing like a fan fiction for it or anything, but
Yeah.
it kind of
Yeah.
inspired like this setup of like their kind of where they're at when they meet. Like I like the idea of the misunderstood. I always loved the misunderstood, anti-hero character. Like that's always speaking of like writing what you love so that you can just always be immersed in it. That's what I love. So
I love that. I love that. And like I can see the threads between those 2. Oh, such a good movie. Such a
I
good
love it.
movie.
I need to go watch it.
Yeah.
I think I watched it
I
like
was
once a
just like,
year.
"Can I squeeze that in today?" Like, let's see here. Oh, okay. Tell me a little bit more about why you decided to do a traveling circus as the setting.
Yeah, well, I live in Montreal, which I didn't even know this until I lived here, but it's considered like one of, if not the best like places for circus in the world. Like it's actually like world renowned for
Okay.
the training and yeah, there's like a circus school here. I forget the name right now, but it's like a world renowned circus school. And I actually have a lot of friends that are like people that are in the circus. Like I met my first friend. And yeah, I was like, so what do you do? She's like, oh, I'm in the circus. And I was like, sorry, what? Like, that's a job. Like, and then like Cirque du Soleil, everyone's heard of them. They're from here. Like they were formed in Montreal. So they have like a permanent, well, it's not permanently set up, but they have like a tent that's always like off and on pitched in the old port in Montreal. So I think I've been to see shows there. Like I pretty much go every time they bring a new show because it's so amazing.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so then I guess just being exposed to that and then having I have a friend that she does like aerial silks. That's her like her primary circus art. That's like where the silks hang from the ceiling and you like wrap up in them and then you
Yes.
like drop and then it catches you and everyone's like, oh, look. So like talking to her about it and like about like how you actually go about learning that. And like, I don't know, it's just such a different world for me. And like having that kind of inside track from as a total outsider, like kind of inspired me. And yeah, I wanted to like explore it a bit more, but in a totally different,
Nice.
different way. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, in a world with real magic and, hybrid people and yeah.
Yeah, like in a totally different way that you'll never see in real life. But I
Yep.
do think some of the like the the magicness of it was a little bit inspired by Cirque du Soleil. Because like if you ever go see a Cirque du Soleil show, it does have this vibe of like, otherworldly creatures. Like they're all dressed up in different outfits and they have like,
Mhm.
crazy makeup. And it does feel like you're watching little like sprites or non-human beings that crawled out of a portal or something.
It does, it does. I live in Phoenix, and so I've been to Vegas a few times, and I've seen the shows out there,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
I mean, because like, they're human, but the way they're moving is just so beyond anything you thought humanly possible.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah. I can't
The
imagine
last
getting to see
one,
it more than that.
yeah, the last one we went to was like it was called Echo, I think. It was like a debut of it that they like debut it in Montreal and then it'll go other places, but it had this contortionist in it and he comes out looking like a little like kitty slash owl or something. He had all this white glowing face paint on and the tail and we were like, oh, how cute. Like look at him. And he was all like, and then next thing you know, he's like, "Rah," and he just twist in half and we were like, Lance.
That's amazing. I will have to see if I can check that out.
Yeah.
Um, nice. I like that. Um, related then, because you talked a little bit about you being a musician and everything. What kind of music do you make?
Yeah, so like I said, I grew up playing classical. And then I was like, we're done with that. And then randomly a few years later, my piano teacher, like bless her heart, she asked me if I wanted to learn pipe organ because she was like, didn't want me to quit forever. So she was trying to find like a totally different thing. And so yeah, I was into that. And then I actually worked like in a church. Like I'm not like a religious person, but I had a job working at a church for a few years as the like resident pipe organist. It's like this is like
Nice.
weird backstory here that no one ever hears. But that the pipe organ is like you have like they're called manuals, but it's like one, two, three keyboards. And then there's also foot keyboard, like a keyboards that you play with your feet. And so that like learning how to do that taught me how to like split my brain into a lot of different ways. So then later in life now I make more like it's more like we're into hip hop and electronic music and
Nice.
synthesizers and like stuff like that. So I think all that background kind of set me up for doing that. Like being
Nice. That's
able to
cool.
play multiple keyboards and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So then let's see here. I want to ask a little bit more about your writing specifically. So, was there ever a moment when you were writing, I guess Sanctuary of the Shadow specifically, but then also just writing in general, moments where you're like, yes, this is it, it's happening. I can feel like the muse shining her light down upon me.
Definitely. I think that's like the moment that every writer wants every day. We don't always get it, but
Yeah.
I think those moments are what, I don't know. I think that's like what makes me love writing when you get that feeling. Like it's
Mhm.
like, you're like, I'm really on to something here. Like something's happening. And it's like, it's kind of like a high, like an adrenaline rush a little bit. And like my husband will know, like I'll come out after, writing, I'll be like so giddy, like, and like fired up. But he's like, oh, you must have had a good day today or whatever. And then other days I'll like trudge out of there like, oh, he's like, no, I'll just go out. Like yeah. So that's definitely, I think, what we're all after.
Mhm. That's fair, that's fair. And now what does your writing practice look like? Is this like a daily thing that you're forcing yourself to do, or do you like how do you conceptualize your writing practice?
Yeah, I think in my experience, if you like that aha, this is it moment doesn't come, maybe in the beginning, you can chase it and wait for it and it's fine. But if you want to do writing long term, you can't wait for that feeling to come or that inspiration to like come and drive you to quickly write. You have to make yourself sit down and like just do the back-breaking, like just like it's like turning the crank on this rusty old machine in your brain or whatever. So usually I write every day. I try to write something every day, even if it's like half a page. Like on a good day, I can churn out like 10, 15 pages.
Nice, yeah.
But on a bad day, I just sit and like groan at my computer and write like half a page. But I just make myself try to do it every day that I can. And I have like my little ritual that I follow beforehand to like kind of get, I don't know. Yeah, I think a little ritual helps. I don't know. It like helps tell your brain that this is what we're doing now and like get in line, let's behave.
Nice, nice. Um, what are you willing to share a little bit of that ritual, or is that
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
gonna keep
It's
that
it's
private?
nothing crazy. Yeah, it's nothing too crazy. It's just like I have I'm a bit of a coffee snob, you could say. So we have like this really fancy espresso machine. So I'll always make myself my like oat milk latte. That's like step one. And then I have like, I don't know if you can see, this is my desk here. So I have like a little like oil diffuser, essential oil diffuser. And I usually turn that on with some like calming, and I have like I have my little lamps and like I just try to like make the zone. And I just make it clean. And that's about it. Like mornings are usually
Nice.
when I try to work. I feel like I have the most creative energy in the morning.
Mhm.
Sometimes if I'm hit with a random inspiration at like 1 in the morning, then I'll write. But usually it's, yeah, a daytime activity.
Nice. Yeah. I more and more I'm seeing or I'm reading about like writers who do it in the morning. And I think I'm gonna have to pick that up because it seems to be the secret sauce to everything.
Yeah, I think there's something about like your brain is fresh and like sharper. And like as a artist, like painter artist, I often found that I did that kind of art much better at night for whatever reason, like drawing in painting and sketching just does not come to me easily in the morning. Like
Mhm.
it's just like like this is the wrong time to draw. It's like first thing in the morning. Like what is that? So I don't know. And say on music too, honestly, like when I play, we have a little jam space. Like we always go there. It's like 8 or 9, but before we even get there, and we're there till like midnight. So but like writing, it's like trying to write at night. I think it's like my eyes are tired. Yeah, I just don't feel as sharp. And there's a lot of willpower involved in writing. I think like when you look at a blank screen and there's nothing there and you have these idea in your head, but it's like, it's going to have to be put into words and typed physically out. Like, yeah, I just see like yeah, more willpower in the morning, more like go getter attitude or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It feels like, that like I hate like tricks, like productivity tricks, but that like eating the frog. Because I guess with music and art, you can immediately see or immediately hear like what you're doing. But with writing,
Mhm.
you're right. Like there's so much just like staring at a blank page and then you
Yeah.
write it and like there's what you think is in your head and then like what comes out onto the paper. And that's
Yeah, are
always the
often very
same.
different.
Yeah.
Yes, very true. I'll have visualized the whole scene that will be like not even a scene. I'll visualize like 4 or 5 chapters ahead, and I'm like, "That's what I'm writing tomorrow." Like, I'm so ready. And then I'll sit down to write, and like 3 lines in, I'm like in a completely different direction. And I'm like, "Never mind." Like, you know, like it's like you just never know.
Yeah, yeah, there's so much. I think there's with writing versus other mediums, there's just so much more trudging through, like, trying to
Yeah.
filter out the noise. So, yeah. Yeah, I'm
I
gonna have to
think,
talk to
yeah,
my
with yeah, with other mediums, like, I don't this might sound weird to say, but I feel like you kind of relax into it. Like, whereas writing, you have to like push into it, if that makes
mhm,
sense. Like
yeah,
when you're drawing, it's like you could just kind of flow with it, or music too. It's like a lot of music is letting go of trying to push and force things. But with writing, like it's not force, but you do have to put forth like energy, if that
mhm.
makes sense at all.
It does kind of, I guess, because like, music and, like, visual art, like painting or drawing are so, like, intuitively driven in a sense. Like, they'd obviously take practice and experience and, like, honing of a skill, but writing, like, is language. That's not something that comes inherent to, like, the human experience. That's something where
Mhm.
we're taught and we have to learn over
That's so
time.
true. Yeah,
Whereas,
that's
like,
so
just
true.
hearing or just seeing, yeah. So that, I guess that makes sense then. So, nice. Okay, so then lastly, one piece of advice, I'm gonna kind of expand on the question here, but I've got one piece of advice you have for people looking to publish their own work, but then also one piece of advice you have for just like budding writers.
Okay, so the budding writers would be like related to what we're just talking about is like um at some point in your writing you're gonna hit a block, and like it will always happen. Everyone, like I remember I thinking like I'm immune to this, and then it happened to me and I was like, okay, now it happens. But I think the like what I've taught myself to do is I like trick my brain, and I say I'm gonna write like the crappiest crap like ever. It's gonna be so bad that by the time I reach the end of the chapter, it's going straight in the bin, or like, you know, but as long as I write something, and then like 9 times out of 10, after I finish writing the most garbage piece of crap chapter ever, when I go back and read it, I'm like, oh, it's not that bad. It's just in my head that I thought it was terrible, you know?
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
think like developing some kind of trick to just make yourself right is so important. Like if you're in your own head, like doubting yourself, or like not in the mood to write, or like whatever it is, like whatever you can do to make yourself put words on the page is like the way to like finish a book, like to get through it. Cause like the fun parts aren't all aren't the whole book. Like there's gonna be parts of the book that feel so shitty to write, but you have to.
yeah. That makes sense. And then
Yeah. And so
publishing advice.
yeah, so publishing advice. Um, my story is kind of weird because I'm hybrid, so I'm both indie and trad published. So
Okay.
what kind of happened for me is that I learned when I had written a bunch of books, and I was like, at some point I need to do something with these books. So okay, fine, I'll publish them. I sat down and learned about the difference between indie and trad, and at first glance, I was like, you know, I really like the sound of trad because trad means traditional, just anyone listening who doesn't know. And I like that because you're backed by a publisher. They have all the connections, work with an editor. You know, you have this whole team of people supporting you. And I also understood that not all traditional publishing deals are good, and you have to have, you know, the discrimination to like see what a good contract, a good offer is. But I was like, in general, this sounds really nice to me. Um, but so I decided I'm going to go that route, and I started applying. And then I think was about 6 months of getting rejection letters. And I was like, what am I even doing here? Like, I don't like doing this. It's like you had to write this elevator pitch for your book into like a paragraph. And then you just like, it just lands somewhere in this busy person's inbox who like doesn't know who you are. And like, you're just convincing them to like give you a chance. And it just felt really like draining. And I was
Yeah.
just like, I'm not into it. So I went and I switched to indie. And then what ended up happening is, as I was publishing my indie series that's published now, I got an offer from Entangled. /Red Tower to publish my fantasy book, Sanctuary of the Shadow. And it was like the last queer letter I ever sent out before I was like, I'm done with this. So I was like, oh my God, it was pretty amazing. But so I guess I have that kind of like I understand both sides' frustration because I didn't have some magic connection that got me, in the door because I went to school or I knew somebody, or it was totally just cold call emails and like a lot of like the stars aligned on my behalf because like Red Tower itself hadn't formed yet. Molly, my editor, she was like, I was actually the first author that she picked up when she started working for Entangled. So there's like all these little like things that aligned. But I guess my advice would be to like why things worked out well for me was because I like knew what I wanted
Mhm.
and I like believed in myself and that I had the ability to like make that happen for myself and I wasn't willing to compromise. And I also like I compromised, but I wasn't willing to give up on things. And I also believed in my writing. And so like when I got rejection letters, I was not like it's because I'm a terrible writer and I should quit. I was like, yeah, I was more actually like I don't want to waste my time pitching my book to people that don't care about it when I know that it's good. So
Yeah.
um yeah, so I think it'd just be like to keep your head up and to constantly like check in with yourself and like, redefine like what is it that I actually want here. And also like indie is a lot of work and there's a steep learning curve, but you can do it. I did it. It was COVID and I had a few months off from life and I just signed up for a bunch of courses and I learned everything from how to make a website to like newsletters to like,
Mhm.
everything. So it's all the information's out there. It's just a matter of like finding out what works best for you and like where your strengths are.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think kind of in this like genre, subgenre as well, there's so much more freedom with self-publication that
Mhm.
I'm glad that like there's like an element of it that feels like, the community of women kind of thing. Like women are always going to find a way to find community and this feels like a way that they've done it.
Yeah, 100%.
So,
I totally agree. Yeah. I love how we could, in the indie world, we could take the weirdest, like most far-fetched stuff and then blow it up huge. And then next thing you know, like we're forcing the stuffy old publishers to take note
yes.
of it. Like
Yes,
it's like,
exactly.
like I was explaining to someone that this exact concept the other day, and I was using like I don't know if you heard about the Tiffany Roberts book about the sci-fi spider alien guy,
Yes.
and I was only indie could have achieved that. And then same thing
Yeah.
like Opal Reigns, what are they, Dustwalker Brides. They're like
Uh,
the giant monsters with the skull heads. Like there's no way any of those books would have ever seen the light of day had they
exactly.
tried to go trad, but like indie readers were like, we love weird shit, like give it to us. And then it's like now like monster romance is a legitimate genre. And like it's like I guarantee you we'll be moving into there's already monstery stuff moving into
Yeah.
trad books. Like it's
Like
it's just
we're
like they
forcing
have
them
to.
to
Yeah,
change. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like the money's here and like even better, the people making the money at first are just like it's just like a random person like all by themselves or with a small team and like these huge corporations are like we're missing out on this like
Yeah.
it's like it's awesome.
Well,
I love it. I love
yeah.
it.
I love sticking it to the man, honestly. Like
Yeah.
like capital M and also just like men.
Yeah, sticking it to men in
Yeah.
general. That's amazing.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today on In Bed with Books. I do we kind of touched on it. So if you're allowed to say anything, is there anything well, okay. This book came out very recently. It came out on the 9th of January, which by the way is my birthday, so it felt like fate.
Oh,
Yes.
cool. My birthday was the 7th, so
Oh
almost
wow.
birthday twin. That's
Okay,
awesome.
nice.
Capricorns, I love it.
Yes. What are you able to say about the sequel?
So yeah, I'm guessing you realize now that the book ends with a nice ending,
Yeah.
and it's
Yes.
because it's standalone. So
Mhm.
um, it's gonna be the next book in the series is gonna like continue the plot of everything happening in the world, but it's gonna focus on new characters. So the main character of book two is gonna be Malika, who's Harrow's best friend. In book one, she's the lead acrobat in the circus.
Mhm.
So yeah, and I really love her. She's like
She's a
just
lot of
like
fun to read.
yeah, she's just like stubborn, strong-willed, feisty, like that classic. Like she's great. She's fun to write too. Yeah, and I know I'm not going to give away yet um who her partner is going to be, but that'll be
Yeah. I
and
wanna
potentially
experience.
unexpected.
Okay. I will say I like that you went with like a kind of like near human looking female main character for the first one, and then in the second one you're like, actually, this one's got a tail.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So the first one, I was like, the guy has the weird features,
Mhm.
and that one gonna have yeah.
I love it. I love it. Okay, thank you. Well, where can we find you online?
Um, all my links to everything are on my website, which is just auroraascher.com. But I'm most active on Instagram, which is aurora.ascher.author. Yeah. And then, yeah, links to like my newsletter and everything are on my website. And I have
Awesome.
a Patreon. Speaking of doing art and stuff, I make like character art on my Patreon.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, thank you for joining me today. And
Yeah.
oh my
Thanks for
gosh.
having me.
Yeah, of course, of course. I was very excited to have you on here. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend as well. And then
Yeah.
to all
You
of
too.
our, oh, thank you. To all of our lovely listeners, happy reading. Thank you for joining me for another episode of In Bed with Books, a bookish podcast for bookish babes. Make sure to like and subscribe so you can keep up with all of the latest updates. And if you have any suggestions for authors, books, or topics that you want to hear about on the podcast, then feel free to DM me on Instagram or shoot me an email. I'm wishing you a lovely rest of your day, and until next time, happy reading.